I may be old, an ancient being to the youth of humanity, but by no means should I have to have been put through such vile, downright disgusting treatment in my final place of resting. Before the scythe comes to take me into the plane of reality beyond our own. My wife had died as of late 2022. Just last month, in fact, she had just turned 70, and we were celebrating with the whole family, until all of a sudden, she dropped to the floor, hit her head on the side of the table, and we all watched in awe as her fragile skull split open like a chestnut in a microwave, and blood started pooling around the floor. Many in the family gained a horrific sense of PTSD, unlike that of any other, and the grandkids, they stayed home for weeks. The day they went, the first words they spoke to their classes was, "Granny's head cracked open." The teachers sent them home instantly and told the parents that they would not return unless they stopped scaring the other children. As for myself, I could barely survive without her. We had come from an era where I would work and she would take care of the home, though society had moved on, and we had accepted that. Old habits die hard, and even in retirement, we seemed content with this way of life. I was almost 80. I should have been the one to go first. She would have been okay. But as for myself, I was sent into a care home. We didn't have a whole lot of money left, and our pensions could barely cover the cost of living anyhow, under the economic crisis we're hammered with today. This left me with a rather shoddy care home, with its reviews quite literally privatized, so people couldn't see how awful the place really was. I detested the fact that I was being sent to one, but I feared my family's hatred of me for bearing my failure to look after myself on them. So I obliged. And less than a month ago, I was wheeled in to begin the final few steps of my life. The very first day I was there, I was greeted with a lovely smile from all the carers that worked there. I felt strange at the unexpectedly joyous greeting and was shown to my room after being told all their names and positions. My room met my expectations far more. It was a barren wasteland containing a minute bed, a single sheet covering, and a brick of a pillow. The walls were no different. Whilst they spoke about the luxury I was to partake in here, I gently knocked on the walls. They were paper thin. Next to my bed, the only other item in the room was a table, with one singular drawer under it, probably so they knew exactly where everything I owned was kept. It should have alerted me to what their detestable scheme was, but I was blind in realizing it until it was unstoppable. The first night mirrored the day. The dinner was excellent, a true fable of what this place was. We were gorged with plenty of meat, vegetables, warm drinks, all sat around one table as we stuffed our faces. There was something unnatural about it all. However, by the time I was back in my room, falling asleep on my rock of a bed, I suddenly began to feel my stomach curdle. My insides felt like a complete mess, and the next day I was considerably low on energy after the night of restless slumber. Yet for the entire week, every single night we would be fed a feast, and we would eat that feast, leaving nothing to spare. The contents within the food were absurd for such an elderly audience, but as I said, there was something unnatural in the atmosphere. The staff even seemed to take glee in watching us smother our stomachs in the grease of the food. They all seemed to smirk as we finished. Each night, I would go back to my room lying on the same bed, feeling tighter and tighter strains grip my insides, squeezing them with such an immense passion that it created a storm of pain that swirled about with the acid of my stomach and the overly saturated kidneys. They were on the brink of destruction. Once the first week had ended, we were cut off from our nightly feasts. They started filling us with black coffee. No milk, only caffeine. For dinner, we were treated with bread, and then dessert. Several enormous bars of chocolate. My kidneys were struggling to cope with the immense pressure from all the fat, caffeine, starch that engulfed my entire body night after night. Then, on a cold winter's night, I crept out of my room, fed up with staying put as my stomach fought the urge to implode. I snuck my way past the vast expanses of the corridors and hallways, eventually walking past a room with a padded metal door, yet the walls beside it stood paper thin, exactly as every other room had in this godforsaken place. We've almost finished with this lot. One more week of coffee and chocolate. Then we'll take it all away. A raspy voice came deep within, and I was taken aback by the sudden reveal of their intent to starve us. That won't work, sir. To truly annihilate them from the inside, we should increase the strain on their bodies to cope with such a vast quantity of food. You give a pig an elephant, and if it's hungry enough, the pig will eat until satisfaction. But humans don't have a boundary for satisfaction. These wrinkly pigs are going to eat themselves to the grave, and we will be there to collect the spoils. Fine, we'll continue to feed them, but when one dies, so do the rest. You understand? I felt the employee nod. Then suddenly I felt his footsteps face towards the door, and he started walking towards it. Before I could take in what I just heard, a loud crash came from behind. I suddenly felt my body collapse to the floor, my head slamming against it, and before I could shut my eyes in agony, I looked up. There was a staff member holding a bloody metal pole in one hand, and his other grabbing my leg and pulling me away. I woke up startled. I was in some kind of cheap hospital room, with all the same staff members standing in front of me, with two other men beside him. You have a kidney stone, sir. The man on the left spoke in a raspy undertone. Oh my, I thought it was him. Yes. Kidney stones need instant treatment, or they cause the body to shut down and die. Now, how awful would that be, sir? He leant over me and started dragging the pillow away from under my head. I felt paralyzed, and the only body part I could move was my eyes. Ah, such a shame. He was found unconscious in his bed just an hour ago. I guess that means he's probably already dead, or at least close enough to it. Put the man out of his misery, John. John then took the pillow and walked over to me. This is what happens when you don't follow the rules. Now, sleep tight. Your kidney just exploded. He then forced the pillow down on my face. I felt flashing colors consume my sight as I could make no attempt to struggle, and instead had to endure the inability to breathe. My memories flashed in by seconds. I could feel every single thought, word, sound, all explode in my head at once, until after a minute, it all went silent. He's dead, John. Reported back to the main office. We will do the same to the rest shortly. They've all had a bit too much to eat. And with that, they all left. As for me, I'm still alive, breathing, but not for long. This place and its people would kill me sooner than later. It doesn't bother me, though. I can't wait to reunite once again with the love of my life.
I saw them whisk her away with the handcuffs around her wrists. I couldn't resist the urge to follow her, or them. The whispers of the onlookers and those around made me understand that she was arrested for murder. It couldn't be possible. I left her alone for only 2 weeks. What could have happened? She got into the detective's car and they drove away. Simultaneously, I flew back into my car and traced them. They arrived at the police station in little time. I saw her wince as they dragged her out of the car into the station. I stepped out of my car and followed them. No one questioned me or even seemed to notice me. Everyone was buried in their own business. I wanted to protest and say Lucy, had nothing to do with whatever was going on. They led her to the interrogation room, and I followed them and slid into the other side of the room, watching them from the glass. Why did you kill him? They struck the first question, and I watched. Lucy didn't respond. She chose silence and stared at her fingers, playing with her nails. The detective sighed. He narrated the scenario, recounting how she moved in with the victim 2 weeks before. My chest stung at those words and breathing became difficult for me. I looked around at those who occupied the room with me and hoped they didn't see the change that occurred. They didn't. Their eyes were fixed on the interrogation going on. I returned my focus to it too. The detective talked about how Lucy lived with the old man, the victim, for exactly 2 weeks on the night he died. He said she drugged the man with too much sugar. He was a type 1 diabetic. And from the day she moved in, she replaced his insulin shots with supplements. Apart from that, she fed him with calculated amounts of sugar. He concluded that her goal was to make the man hyperglycemic. Of course, when that became bad, he started to develop kidney stones. Rather than take him to the hospital, Lucy just left the man and continued to give him increased shots of the supposed insulin. Of course, the man believed her. She was always his nurse before she became his mistress in those 2 weeks. "Why did you do it? For his inheritance?" The man asked Lucy again, and she didn't respond. Her resolve to remain silent was strong. The man stared at her, frustrated. After a while, she raised her head and said, "I'll speak only to the head of your department." The detectives interrogating her sighed, and all eyes in the other room were fixed on me. I stared at them for a while before I understood. Of course, I was the head of the criminal department. Of course, that was why no one looked at me or shook when I entered the station. I exited the other side and entered the interrogation room itself. Lucy's face lit up as she saw me. I sized her up and watched the light in her eyes dissipate to fear, and soon after, her face was blank again. I took the seat of the man who was previously asking the questions. He stood at the other side of the room watching the both of us. "Tell them I didn't do it," Lucy whispered, and I stared. Her eyes screamed at me to say something, but what was I supposed to say? Did she expect me to tell everyone under me that she was my girlfriend and I trusted her enough not to commit murder? After a while, I simply said, "What happened?" I nodded my head slightly. Lucy started. She said that her patient, the victim, Mr. Howard, was making advances at her whenever she came for his checkup. She didn't like it, and she didn't know what to do because he was one of her highest-paying patients. She said she told her boyfriend. At the mention of the word boyfriend, she looked at me, and from her eyes I could tell that she was about to mention my name. I shook my head, making sure the others didn't see, and she skipped that part. Her boyfriend told her to ignore the man, but a few weeks later he told her to return his advances because he had a plan. She decided to go with whatever he wanted to do. She got closer to Mr. Howard and started to discover his massive wealth. She told her boyfriend about it, and he sped up the plan. 2 weeks ago, he traveled after giving her the new set of insulin, the supplement, and a diet timetable to follow. He also told her to convince the man to bring her into his house for a better access. She moved in with the man as he requested and followed the timetable her boyfriend gave her strictly. I asked if she knew when she was collecting those things that it would cause harm to her patient, and in the long run, kill him. She hesitated for a while, but nodded. "I need your answer in words, Miss Lucy." "Yes," she said. "You killed him," I said, and she shot me a confused look. I directed my next statement to the detectives, telling them they have the confession they need. She shot up at me, grabbed my sleeve, and screamed in annoyance at how I was supposed to help her. She shouted that this wasn't the plan, but I wasn't interested. I looked towards the detectives, and they pulled her away from me and then out of the interrogation room. It was easy to tell that they were taking her to prison. Her case was soon to be in court. She had confessed her crime. I dusted my hands, rearranged my sleeves, and walked out of the interrogation room like nothing happened. Of course, a lot had happened. A lot in my favor. I didn't go on vacation like we both planned for her to say, or like I reported at the station. I was in that house with her, watching her feed the man with less insulin and more sugar. I got in like the chef I was not and cooked all the food. She simply served him and was the only one in his sight. We did it for the money, and someone had to be caught, but it couldn't be me. It could only be her, the nurse that the man trusted. I entered my office and smiled as the report on Lucy's case was brought to my desk. No one could catch me. All evidence pointed at Lucy. Soon, when her psychiatric problems were revealed, no one would believe her words. She wouldn't know or even believe that not only Mr. Howard was drugged, but even her own food was spiked. Spiked with drugs that would tweak her mental system and turn her insane. Her words would not be tenable, and only the evidence against her would keep her imprisoned. The inheritance would be mine and mine alone. I forwarded the case to the prosecution office.
My name is Douglas. I'm 53 years old. I have a small shop in which I sell sportswear, clothes, sports shoes, also some bodybuilding items. Last year during Black Friday, I also took the chance to make some good business, which was precisely what happened. I was very happy with the outcome. Great profit was made, especially because we sold products that are already waiting too long to be bought. Back then I had 2 employees, Dexter and Marcello. They were both excellent professionals. I also had a wife, Prudence, who's 10 years younger than me. When I arrived home after that busy Friday, I was tired but happy to speak to my wife. "It was a success. Lots of work, but totally worth it," I said to her. "I'm glad to hear that, honey. Now finish your late dinner and then let's go to bed. You need your rest," my wife said. "That's the best idea I heard all day," I replied, finishing the fine meal that Prudence had prepared for me. The next day when I woke up, it was already 3 in the afternoon. Of course, our shop was closed, and obviously my wife wasn't in bed with me. For sure, her day started a lot earlier. I was just glad that she kept quiet and didn't wake me up. I definitely needed that extra rest. I went to the bathroom to take a shower. I shaved and brushed my teeth. When I got out of the bathroom, I noticed the house was still very silent. I realized my wife wasn't home. She went out and didn't return yet. Nothing strange, I thought to myself as I prepared myself a cup of coffee. What was odd was the fact that the newspaper was nowhere to be seen. This was something unusual. I called Prudence to check on her. Her cell phone was off. When it was already 10 p.m., my wife was still away, and I tried her phone several times already. Worried, I went to the police. There wasn't much that I could tell them, just a classic case of a missing person. "Did you try calling the hospitals nearby? Her friends, relatives, co-workers?" The police asked me the usual questions. "Actually, not really. It didn't even cross my mind," I answered. "Do so, please. Keep in touch within the next 48 hours, Mr. Murray. If your wife's still missing, we'll then open a file on her and start an investigation," they replied. It seemed fair enough. That night I called several hospitals, not just from our area. I also called everyone that I could think of that knew Prudence. Since my wife didn't work outside home, she had no co-workers or bosses that I could contact. No one had seen Prudence since the last 24 hours. More days went by, and my wife was now officially a missing person. We didn't have any sons or daughters, so I was now dealing with her disappearance on my own. But show must go on, right? This meant I had to get back to my shop. The fact that I was the boss and the owner didn't allow me to take time off, especially after that profitable Black Friday. There was a lot of work to do. I also told my employees Dexter and Marcello about what happened. They were very supportive. "I'm very sorry to hear about that, Mr. Murray. I don't really know what to say," Dexter said. "If the authorities are already working on the case, the best thing to do is wait and pray," Marcello replied. I thanked them both. My hopes were not very high, though. Nevertheless, I was still going to receive some unexpected news, and definitely not the kind that I wished for. During the next week, I went to the bank, and I was stunned when I found out that half of my savings were missing. Already under enormous pressure, I made quite a scene. "What is this? I was robbed! I demand an explanation!" Within a few moments, I was now speaking to the manager in his own office. "Mr. Murray, I'm very sorry, but your wife just came here last week and She simply took that money with her, cash. Both y'all allowed to move that money, as you must remember. Mrs. Murray said that you were going through a lot of work and needed that money to pay some additional bills, and that you were also going to open up a new shop. I didn't ask any questions since both of you are our clients for 20 years now. When I heard those words, I snapped. Just too much. I didn't hurt the bank manager, but I destroyed his office while screaming like a maniac. Of course, security was called. And then the police too, as I was taken under custody. Not for long, though. Next day I was out of jail. The authorities were very comprehensive, and the bank's manager as well. My wife was now being pursued as a criminal who was missing. In all, she had taken $60,000 with her. Money that I needed to keep the business flowing. The half that I still had wasn't enough. Also because I needed it for my own personal expenses. Health insurance, houses, we had 2, cars, etc. I had to let one of my employees go. Don't worry, Mr. Murray, you can let me go. Dexter needs the job more than I do. I mean, he's older, I'm young, and I was thinking of going back to my country anyway, Marcello said. He was a Colombian citizen. Thank you for understanding, Marcello. I'm sorry. It was great working with you. You're a good man and you will be missed. Best of luck, I said. At least this decision made it easy for me. I sold my houses and bought an apartment. I also sold my cars, which were expensive, and got a modest one. Step by step, I was able to pull myself together. But as time passed, I got super obsessed with the idea of finding my wife. Tired of waiting for the police to give me answers, I hired a private investigator. A woman, actually, named Joanne Moon. And within 3 months, I was summoned to Joanne's office. I have something to show you, she said on the phone. Burning with excitement and curiosity, in less than 1 hour, I was in Joanne Moon's office. We found our wife. And her friend. You can see for yourself, Mr. Murray, Joanne said as she showed me a collection of pictures. I didn't even say a word when I saw what and who was in the pictures. My wife, smiling and having fun on the beach. But she wasn't alone. Marcello was with her. In some pictures, they were kissing and holding each other. I understood immediately what had happened. I felt stupid and betrayed. The American police was informed of all this, but since Prudence and Marcello are living in Colombia, my only hope is for them to return to the United States so that they can be brought to justice. Unless I travel there, take justice in my own hands.